Because the world will challenge you and say, do you believe this is the most important book for me to read? Oh, yes. You read it? No, I've read bits. Well, let's read quite a big bit tonight. All right, I'm going to read parts of 4 chapters, reading from Judges 13 through to Judges 16. Right, they come in all sizes, don't they? Right, let's read Judges chapter 13 from verse 1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was sterile and remained childless. And the angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, set apart to God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Verse 24 says, the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. That means sunshine, actually. Called him Sunshine, Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahane Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Do those names grab you? Now, come on, be honest. Well, they grabbed me because in October I was in a bus, and the man sitting next to me on the bus said, that is Zorah over there, and that is Eshtaol over there. I said, you mean the bus is right in Mahane Dan? And he said, yes. I thought, that's great. I'm right where Samson was. And just a little further down the road, there was a cafe which said Samson's Cafe. And I said, was that where he met Delilah? But he said, just behind there, over the hill, is another place called Timnah. And I thought, well, that gets me into chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah. You see, this is about real people, real places. The Bible is fact. We're dealing with real people, real emotions, real problems, real relationships. So Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. They talked very politely to their parents in those days, and this was how they went about a courtship. And his father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to these uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, she's the right one for me. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time they were ruling over Israel. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother, and as they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, and he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he'd done. There's something you don't want to tell your parents. There might just be something wrong with what you've done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to see the lion's carcass, and in it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he'd taken the honey out of the lion's carcass. Now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for bridegrooms. And when he appeared, he was given 30 companions. Let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't give me the answer, you will give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. And he replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Well, for 3 days they couldn't get the answer. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us? Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't even explained it to my father and mother," he replied, "so why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day he finally told her, because she continued to press him, and she in turn explained the riddle to her people. And before sunset on the 7th day the men of the town came to Samson and said, "What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion?" And Samson said, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have been able to explain my riddle." And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, and he went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those that explained the riddle. And burning with anger, he went up to his father's house. And Samson's wife was given to the friend who had attended him at his wedding. Now we'll turn over to the last part of the sad story. Verse 15 of chapter 16. It's another woman now. Her name is now Delilah. And Delilah said to Samson, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." And with such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite, set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more." So the rulers of the Philistines came back with silver in their hands, and having put him to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy Samson into our hands." And when the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." And while they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "O sovereign Lord, remember me, O God. Please give me my strength just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on these Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, and bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more while he died than when he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He'd led Israel 20 years. I used to think that Samson was one of the world's great failures. I used to think that he was a man who'd got everything going for him and threw it away. I used to think of this man as the man who lost the Spirit of the Lord, the man who finished up blind, chained, performing in a circus ring. And I thought, what a tragic waste of a man. What a dreadful story, what a dreadful end. And that was my impression of Samson. I think I must have picked it up in Sunday school or somewhere.